Transparency Task Force. We are spending more and more and more of our time coming to one simple, straightforward conclusion. Enough is enough.
Corruption, you will be the death of me. Corruption, you are my only enemy. Corruption, you will be the death of me. Corruption, you are my only enemy. If I try to undermine your reason.
I was the Police and Crime Commissioner for the Thames Valley, led nationally on fraud. It was my police force that successfully prosecuted the Lloyds HBOS Reading frauds, which approached £1 billion. They were only prosecuted on 245 million. And I always say Lloyds HBOS because people forget that Lloyds owned HBOS and had done for several years, for about 7 years. Throughout that investigation, Lloyds denied a fraud had taken place. They lied repeatedly. But it wasn't until the judge and the jury came up with the verdict of guilty on these various bankers that Lloyds would even admit to a massive fraud had taken place. It was quite extraordinary. What was going on in Reading was going on nationally on a far wider scale, notably out of Lloyds, Bristol, London and Leeds, and RBS out of Goga Bank in Edinburgh. None of these have been investigated properly. The Financial Conduct Authority, the National Crime Agency, the Treasury and police have all refused to investigate and denied massive banking frauds have taken place. There's absolutely no shortage of evidence of this. The current number 2 in the Met was for a number of years the director of the National Crime Agency, and she was well briefed on all of this, yet the NCA still failed to investigate, as does the Met. The Commissioner of the Met, Mark Rowley, is also well aware of what has been going on within our banking system. Andrew Bailey, who ran the Financial Conduct Authority, was well briefed on what was going on. I briefed him in person, and I have copious correspondence with him about this. Every fraud that was passed to the FCA went straight to him and never came out again. He did nothing. He now runs the Bank of England. Thousands have lost their jobs, lives are ruined, and viable companies destroyed by clear banking fraud, ably assisted, I may say, by various accountants and legal practices. Most police forces simply do not have the skills or resources to take on banking fraud. It is too expensive to take on, and they do not have the capability to do so without employing outside consultants. Thames Valley had to take on about 40 or 50 consultants, accountants, to bring the prosecution of HBOS Lloyds. Some police forces, like Avon and Somerset, seem to do all they can do to cover up the frauds, not investigate them, which I find extraordinary. Two police forces that should have the capability and capacity to investigate major banking fraud are the Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police. Both have refused to do so in spite of ample evidence being given to them. The main reason for the very existence of the City of London Police is to combat fraud. It utterly fails to do so and shifts the responsibility to a call centre in Glasgow, Action Fraud, which incidentally is sponsored by Lloyds Bank, as is the National Crime Agency. In my view, the City of London Police should simply be disbanded. It has no useful purpose. Its main purpose was to deal with city fraud. If it passes that on to a call centre in Glasgow, it should go. And the Met at the moment, it is disgraceful that it has not taken on one major banking fraud. It's interesting that since Thames Valley took on the banking frauds out of Lloyds HBOS Reading, only one single major banking fraud has been prosecuted, and that had to be done privately. The CPS wouldn't take it on. The Met should set up a properly financed fraud division with the necessary skills, and it should be really independent of the Metropolitan Police. The cost of fraud and the amount stolen through fraud vastly exceeds the amount stolen through other crimes. It is several times the value of the entire illegal drugs trade, yet a minuscule amount of police effort or finance is put to doing anything about it. The police simply ignore white-collar crime. Several members of the House of Lords from the banking world should, I believe, be investigated for their participation in major banking fraud. If anybody wants to look it up, the Turnbull report produced by Sally Masterton laid it out clearly what was going on. Sally Masterton, incidentally, worked for Lloyds. She was asked to write the report on what had gone on. She wrote a brilliant report. It was only in draft form. It's 150 pages. She was sacked for writing it without compensation. It took myself and Lord Hague in a room with the then chairman of Lloyds, Lord Blackwell. We practically had him by the throat, and eventually she was paid proper compensation. But needless to say, she had to sign an NDA. Why should you sign an NDA? Why should anybody who is compensated, which some people were for the Lloyds HBOS frauds, why should you sign an NDA to get back the money that has been stolen from you? I find that completely wrong. Banking fraud has and still is seriously damaging UK companies and the country's reputation as a safe place to do business. It is utterly disgraceful, and still nothing is being done about it properly. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very, very much indeed. We're now going to be hearing from Mr. Paul Carlier.
But this is exactly what we have here in the UK, and this is what's happened to many of the victims stood here today. You would have thought you had protection, only to find out later on when you needed it that the protection you should have had wasn't provided, and there's no intention of providing it going forward. Nowhere are all of these elements more clearly exposed in the post office scandal. Layer after layer of failure, dishonesty and concealment, even to the point where post office lawyers have been concealing information from the statutory public inquiry whilst being paid millions of pounds to do so, and whilst the post office is paying lawyers and consultants vast sums of money for their work in settlement discussions, and then offering sub-postmasters as little as 13% of their true damages. This after all the publicity. But the post office are not the only institution or public body operating in this way. The entire hierarchy of oversight here in the UK is infected in the same way. And I'll use Blackmore Bond as an example. In December 23, the FCA, and particularly Theresa Chambers, Nicky Rathy and new chair Ashley Alder, all made written or oral representations to the Treasury Select Committee regarding Blackmore Bond. They told the TSC that after more than 7,000 hours of investigation into all aspects of Blackmore Bond that fell within the FCA's perimeter of authority and powers, they were taking no action. Yet three months later on, in March of this year, lawyers with whom I and victims have been working for almost 2 years initiated legal action against an FCA authorised firm on behalf of Blackmore Bond victims who lost a combined 18 million of the 46 million lost. The action is against an FCA authorised insurance broker, a firm and a significant part of the Blackmore Bond scandal that is squarely in the heart of the FCA perimeter authority. But a firm and whose role in this scandal the FCA has always failed to mention. There is zero chance the FCA did not know of their role and did not have the same evidence I obtained, and that is now being utilised by the law firm. The solution being, don't go to the FCA with it, go to a law firm. The commonality between Blackmore Bond and all the other financial misconduct scandals here today is the abdication of responsibility and objectivity by regulators and public bodies, and collusion with various other public bodies to the ultimate detriment of victims. In the case of the footballers and other victims here today, how much collusion between, or lack of action by, police and regulators has there been on behalf of HMRC or other bodies so as to keep things joined up with the HMRC positions or those of other bodies? Evidence we have shows that the Insolvency Service, Information Commissioner and City of London Police all buried Blackmore Bond evidence to help the FCA keep things joined up and conceal the FCA failures in 2017. Another commonality between the financial scandals and the post office scandals, the role of civil servants. This applies in respect to civil servants in HM Treasury in regard to oversight of the FCA. HM Treasury is populated by FCA secondees, all whispering in the ear of the ministers. And in the case of the Department of Business and Trade, in the case of the Post Office, governments and ministers come and go, but civil servants remain. And incoming ministers rely on briefings and the integrity of those civil servants. If those civil servants find themselves exposed, as many did in the Post Office scandal or financial scandals, and are therefore conflicted, how reliable are their briefings to ministers? We urge the incoming government to stop this cycle and listen to the voices of victims, to be more like Lord Arbuthnot, without whom the Post Office scandal might not have been exposed, and to look properly at the evidence. Don't rely on the advice of these civil servants alone, or challenge that advice. Don't be found later to have not done enough at the time. However, the most important commonality of every fraud, scandal, scam or scandal is the victims. And as you can see from those here today, whether you're a former Premier League player, a military veteran or a lifelong NHS worker, the outcome is the same: loss, distress and futility. That has to change. For that to change, we need an entirely new hierarchy of oversight. What we have is a hierarchy riddled with past failures and an ongoing dishonesty so as to conceal those past failures. Past failures that predetermine the outcome of future issues of the same nature. A body that can't take action in respect to the new issues reported to them because they failed to take action regarding a prior issue of the same nature. Lather, rinse, repeat. And this is why we're all here today. A name that may be familiar to many victims here today is City of London Police, and in particular Karen Baxter. Karen Baxter is the former commander of economic crime at City of London Police. Her disastrous track record on fraud is well documented, as is their catastrophic failure to act on multiple reports about blackmail bond and other scams and frauds. Many of you may be surprised to hear that she is now a senior figure in the FCA's enforcement unit. At a parliamentary event in 2022, Karen said, "Victims of fraud are not worried about prosecutions, only about getting their money back." Utterly wrong. I guarantee that every future victim of fraud would rather they had prosecuted or taken action against previous fraudsters, significantly reducing the chance of you becoming a future victim. Under Karen Baxter, the City of London Police also ignored evidence of systemic fraud by Lloyds Bank BSU and RBS GERG, including reports by Anthony Stansfeld directly to Karen Baxter. Both units within those banks destroyed many thousands of viable UK small businesses. Miss Baxter at that parliamentary event in 2022 told me that only she and those with experience within the system could provide the solution to the broken system. I disagreed. How can she or those within the system fix it when they allowed it to become so catastrophically broken in the first place? They either didn't see the problems or chose to ignore them. And when those that have spent any time within the system have a series of past failures to answer for, all of that just prejudices or compromises their approach going forward. Effective regulation and enforcement is also a vital deterrent, reducing future offending and damage, whereas ineffective or compromised regulation now only encourages future offending and damage. I might support Arsenal Football Club, but we're all members of a much more significant club, Victims United. A club that shouldn't exist, but that must exist if appropriate action and remedies to prevail. A club that needs nationwide support, because whilst many are not currently members of it, one day soon you or a member of your family likely will be. That's why I say enough is enough.
Fantastic.
Paul, that was fantastic. Thank you very, very much indeed.